Hey everybody, we're back and we're continuing on in Buddhism. Now, lay Buddhists, they're going to try to work toward um, achieving a higher reincarnation by making donations of food, clothing, lodging, and they're going to try to take care of those community of the monks called the Sangha. Now, the triple jewel is this symbol, and one definition of a Buddhist is someone who takes refuge in the triple jewel, and this is the Buddha, his teachings, and the community of monks, the Sangha. Now, one interesting thing I kind of wanted to bring up is you'll see in a lot of Buddhist artwork, or even on the Buddha himself, you'll see swastikas. And the tradition, this is obviously this is the symbol that we um, in the West know primarily from the Nazis hijacking that in World War II, but it's traditionally a symbol of good fortune, and it's found on the soles and the palms of the Buddha long before the Nazis stole it. So that's cool. Now, the three cardinal faults is this wheel in the wheel of life is greed, symbolized by a pig, hatred by a snake, and and delusion by a rooster. Now, as far as do the Buddhists have a Bible, Buddhism doesn't have a collection of texts constituting a Bible, but there were a bunch of early collections made for the monks, and there are a number of different kinds of writings here. We'll move on. Now, Buddha is organized. He organized his followers into a holy community of monks and nuns. Men and women devoted their entire lives to the religion. Now, these monks and nuns are keeping Buddhism alive today primarily, and there are more than 3 million Buddhists in the world, the fourth largest religion. More or less, if you had to kind of like simplify it, Buddhism is split into two main groups: Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana. So we will get to that. Let's talk about the first one, Theravada. This is about 38% of Buddhists are Theravada, and it comes from the word meaning themes, right? And so the teachings of Theravada Buddhism, number one, monks are the perfect models of Buddhism. Poverty, simplicity. Even lay people are meant to kind of serve as monks. Monks wear these saffron robes, just like the Buddha wore. They shave their heads. They never marry. They live in monasteries. And in return, the monks give spiritual guidance to the community when the community feeds them. Now, young men will often worship by becoming monks temporarily. During the rainy season, when there's little farm work to do, they'll shave their heads, put on robes, and go begging. Even young boys, 4 and 5, will do this. Now, here is maybe the most important theological point that's different between Theravada and Mahayana is the fourth one here. A person must travel to the path to nirvana alone, as Siddhartha did it. A seeker should gain insights from his own experience, the application of knowledge and critical thinking. Um, this is this is the most important part. Is that beyond listening to the monks, beyond reading the readings of the teachings of the Buddha, one must find one must find nirvana or find enlightenment within, and that's the most important part of Theravada Buddhism, and that's different from Mahayana. And this is 56% see themselves as Mahayana. Now, this teachings people should help one another reach nirvana. This is not simply personal enlightenment, but the enlightenment of all human beings. So it's kind of a collective struggle um, to become enlightened. That's a pretty big difference. Now, there are a wide range of approaches to enlightenment. It includes not just meditation and personal discipline, but selfless service and working in the world for the benefit of others. Selflessness is the main focus. Um, one important part of this is that we're all related. Since we've been reincarnated many times, the beggar in the street may have been our mom, the criminal might have been your brother. So we have an obligation to help those who are suffering before you leave this life and eventually enter nirvana. Mahayana Buddhism also emphasizes the Buddha nature in all things. And since the nature within us needs to recognize who we are, therefore, this world with the right perspective can be nirvana itself. That's pretty deep too. All right, some versions of Mahayana that kind of want to point out. There is Vajrayana Buddhism. This is also known as Tantric or Tibetan Buddhism. They believe that the more a prayer is repeated, the more powerful it becomes, and a prayer can be written out and placed on a prayer wheel, and the wheel spins, and the prayer is repeated as it turns in the wind. Also, you might have heard of Zen Buddhism. This began in China and spread to Korea and Japan. Now, Zen Buddhism centers on meditation, and the meditators are expected to sit with their eyes closed and count each breath without thinking about anything else. It's not really easy, and Koreans have these puzzles and riddles that help the students stay focused that are fascinating. There's also something called Pure Land Buddhism. This is primarily in Japan, um, where they worship a particular version of the Buddha of boundless light. I'm sorry, and belief will lead to a rebirth in a paradise, like a physical paradise known as the Pure Land. So many Japanese Buddhists also practice the ancient religion of Shinto. All humans, and the beliefs of Shinto are that all humans are born pure, and divine forces live in all things that inspire awe and wonder, such as a waterfall or a whirlpool, a mysterious cave, or even a fascinating person. Sincerity of heart, goodness and kindness are greater than creeds or beliefs or systems of theology. So, a very basic understanding of Shinto. Festivals are essential to bring us together. Sumo comes from Shinto, so sumo wrestlers. Um, Also, strict focus on the here and now, being present, and that's something that even Jesus talks about. Japanese Buddhists will worship both at Shinto shrines as well as Buddhist temples, and so religious festivals in Japan can incorporate all of these things: Buddhist, Shinto, Confucian principles. Now, speaking of our boy Confucius, Confucianism is an ethical and philosophical system uh, developed from the teachings of the 5th century Chinese philosopher Confucius. It's not a religion, it's more kind of a philosophical system. It focuses on human morality and right action. Some of the big themes that are in Confucianism are the importance of having rituals, the importance of relationships, filial piety, which means take care of your parents, loyalty, humanity, being a gentleman or gentlewoman, and the correct way to say things. Make sure that you are saying the right thing the right way. That was Confucius's big deal. Okay, so some famous quotes that are attributed to Confucius are here, and you can catch up with those when you're looking um, at the slides. So they're pretty cool, pretty deep, and pretty famous. And lastly, I want to kind of focus on the Dalai Lama. Now, the Tibetan Buddhists believe that the Dalai Lama to be the present incarnation of the Bodhisattva of compassion. Between the 17th century and 1959, the Dalai Lama was the head of the Tibetan government, but the Chinese government has now taken over, and they've exiled the Dalai Lama, and it's been kind of a bad way, kind of a bad situation, and now he's living in exile. The current Dalai Lama is a respected Tibetan Buddhist uh, monk, and he's oftentimes granted the title His Holiness. Dali means ocean, and Lama is the equivalent of the word guru. So this is like the ocean of wisdom. Now, upon his death, the Dalai Lama, uh, the monks institute a search for his reincarnation, and then they put a bunch of his things there. And if the kid picks out the the items from the last Dalai Lama, then they know that this is a reincarnation of that last Dalai Lama. Now, despite its very secular stance, the government of China has claimed the power to approve the naming of the reincarnations of the Tibetan Dalai Lama. And so there's this big struggle between that, and that's kind of more of a historical thing. But I have some information here, um, and